Associated Press reports this week, UK passes bill that will eventually ban cigarette purchases. Children born after December 31st, 2008 will be banned from ever buying cigarettes under the Tobacco and Vapes Bill. It is currently illegal to sell cigarettes, tobacco products, or vapes to people younger than 18 in the UK, but most youths today will continue to face a ban their entire life as the minimum age to buy cigarettes rises each year. The passage gives the UK one of the toughest anti-smoking measures in the world. The law is similar to one New Zealand lawmakers passed in 2022 that was later repealed by a subsequent government. And Sarah, let's just jump right into this discussion, because when I saw this story come across this week, it irritated me, to say the least, because there's so many things to criticize about the UK and the state of the government in the UK, the state of the culture in the UK. A lot of problems. And as a not so closeted Anglophile, I'm very concerned about the state of things in England and Scotland. And this just felt like sort of salt in the wound of all these other things that are already going poorly in England and in the United Kingdom. That then now, not only can you basically not smoke anywhere, it's really difficult to. They don't even let you have the nice packaging on pipe tobacco tins and things in many parts of the UK. It's all just horrible, bland style packaging that screams at you that you're killing yourself in some way. But now they're essentially instituting this ban on future people ever being able to buy tobacco at all. And putting aside the fact that, well, tobacco in moderation is actually pretty good for you, especially if you're a guy. But the issue of the lack of freedom, the nanny state in full effect here, saying, no, we're going to take this away. I mean, what's next? Is it going to be alcohol? Are they going to ban alcohol? Especially because, it's very offensive to Muslim immigrants, perhaps, to Muslim UK residents.
Alcohol excess is actually a huge problem in the UK. So they eliminated the 2 a.m. cutoff on various different bars and pubs, but especially it was a thing for bars would close at 2 a.m. They eliminated that because they wanted to stop people from doing the whole last round. I'm going to get multiple drinks all at once and then drink them very rapidly, sort of binge drinking. And then it turned out that what they thought would happen, which is people just leave normally at 2:30, it didn't happen, and people just stayed out all night. And so you actually had an increase in violence and just disordered behavior. So if you want to argue that what we're doing is just to bring about a higher level of culture or something, I don't think you can make that argument while keeping alcohol legal and more open than in most U.S. states. What you're seeing here, though, is the sort of normalization of infantilization of the public. I think that's very fair. You're seeing, okay, well, the regular people, these little people, aren't able to make their own decisions, for their health, so we'll do it for them. And I think it's also probably a consequence of a nationalized healthcare system, such that they're going to argue, okay, well, we've decided this affects a person's health, and since we have to, as a collective, deal with the costs of healthcare, therefore we're going to rule your life and prevent you from making this decision. And it's like, okay, where does that end? Because the necessary sort of end point of that lived philosophy is, well, can they force you to eat certain foods as well? Can they force you to do certain exercise? Otherwise, you don't have access to the healthcare system. I don't actually think it's that far removed, because it's a natural extension of a certain ethos.
Yes, exactly. And this, I think, is interesting in consequence to us Catholics as well, because as Catholics, we do believe that you can legislate morality. We do believe that it's the duty of a state to have laws that defend and even enforce morality. Like, again, the issue of abortion. We want there to be a blanket ban on abortion. And
all forms of murder.
Yes, exactly. That should come in conjunction with other things that encourage the alternatives, that support the alternatives in a certain way. Let's have maybe a certain level of a safety blanket for people who deal with quote unquote unplanned pregnancies. If you're planning to to do the things that result in a baby, you should be understanding that there's going to be a potential baby. Let's go for that. But there should be, again, these things that from a Catholic perspective and an understanding of what the moral obligations are. You should have things that accompany these bans, but we do believe in enforcing certain standards of morality. But we also believe that you should not be, again, dictating every little thing that a person does in this way, especially when this is not really a moral issue. This issue of what someone is consuming, it's more about proportion. That is the Catholic issue. It's not about what food you're eating. It's about what proportion you're eating. It's about whether you are being moderate in your intake of whatever, whether you're understanding that you should be striving for a healthy way of life. But that can include any. There's no definitions on that from a Catholic point of view by any means. So
because we expect people to be reasonable and to make reasonable choices, and we understand, and we expect them to be capable of understanding what prudence is.
Yes, those are principles, not specifics that you are enforcing. So I think there's room for debate on issues like trying to prevent public indecency from drinking, something like that. I think that's perfectly reasonable. But the idea of banning alcohol consumption entirely is difficult, I think, even from a Catholic perspective of enforcing morality, because it's something that the Catholic faith has always understood is fine in moderation. So,
so should you have a person who's staggering walking down the street? No, I don't think you should.
Yes.
So in that sense, you could, morally or legally dissuade public drunkenness.
Yes, public drunkenness.
For example, but that doesn't mean that you could, say, well, two people can't, have a glass of wine over dinner. There's a very different concepts. Yes. And that's what we're saying. Exactly.
And it's similar to, again, this smoking ban. It's basically saying, no, you're not allowed to smoke anywhere ever, not even in private. You cannot purchase these materials. And that's far removed from something that says, oh, well, in the guise of public health and public consideration for others, you can't be smoking in certain areas. You can't be smoking in or around schools. You can't be smoking in or around public restaurants where people want to be free from it, that sort of thing. That's a reasonable approach that I think you shouldn't have any objection to as a Catholic. But this idea of completely banning this practice, which does not have the same, by any means, moral level of something like, again, abortion, which is murder, or of degenerate acts where you're trying to actively prevent people from sinning. Someone who simply lights up a cigarette or a pipe or a cigar is not committing a sin inherently. So this type of enforcement goes far beyond even what a strong Catholic belief in the duties of the state would endorse.
When I was a kid, Jake, in the British pubs that I, went to, which is not like a bar, it's a lot more family friendly. But whenever I would go, there's usually one or two people who would actually smoke in that environment. And I know it's changed over the past 20 years or so, but that was just kind of a normal thing, that they would sit at the sort of elevated area. Yeah. So you would have it's kind of like, it's a bad analogy, but it's kind of like the sports bar thing where you have tables that are far away from the actual regular bar that serves the drinks, kind of like that. And so the people who would smoke would just kind of sit around the bar that was elevated, and the people who weren't, or who were there with their families, would just sit at the tables. And it was just kind of normal. And it was also part of the cultural expectation of what you would find at a pub. Yeah. And so it was just kind of, I remember being shocked when I heard that had changed legally, just because it seemed like such a culturally normal thing. That people go there to relax, and for some people, relaxing means having a cigarette. Exactly. And so it really changed the entire dynamic there.
Well, yeah, and if you look at old media in the U.S., people smoked everywhere and constantly, and there's room for a moderate position on. Okay, we want to cut down on this. We want to, again, it's like dealing with alcohol when alcohol is being abused. I mean, people used to drink way heavier before Prohibition than after Prohibition. So in a way, you can say that Prohibition did have an effect, and you can argue that it was actually a positive effect. But the point is that you can buy alcohol now. Prohibition went away. Maybe you can argue that it was necessary that we had a temporary ban to get people reset to a state of more moderation in their behaviors, and then you can free that up again. There's room to argue something like that, but the way that the UK is going is it's just increased nanny statism, really.
Right.
It's about regulating what people do, and it's almost this assertion of power on, being able to control the populace, especially when you see things like this and then you see no action on real moral horrors like the UK grooming gangs that we've talked about, these rape gangs and these sort of things. And this is the priority. Okay, there's
exactly that's the thing. You see the state of England, and honestly, just how atrocious it is in regards to things like self-defense, the increase in stabbings that are going on, the increases in acts of terrorism, the fact that you have I think it's now, I believe it's 1 in 8 households admit to skipping food so that their children can be fed. That's a rate of poverty that we shouldn't expect to see in the industrialized West, but we do. You have the elderly who are having trouble paying for their heating costs, and we've had multiple who died last winter as a result of that. And again, these are things that you don't associate with civilization. It is an absolute state of decay, civilizational decay that's going on in that country. And their response is, you know what we should do? We should ban cigarettes.
Yes.
Rise Right exists to help you rise right, to start your morning off with Catholic faith and reason, so you can handle whatever the world throws at you each day with a firm foundation in truth and hope. But we can only accomplish this with the help of listeners like you. Support our mission at thestationofthecross.com.